A hand reaches for a coffee cup. It looks simple, automatic even. You decided to pick it up. Or did you? What if your brain had already decided, before you even knew? Somewhere inside you, right now, thousands of tiny choices are happening. Most of them too small to notice. A blink, a breath, the tilt of your head toward a sound. And a few bigger ones. What to eat, what to say, when to move. Each one carries the same quiet assumption that it started with you. A thought first, then an action. But in a small lab in 1983, someone asked a question so simple it almost sounds childish. Not with philosophy, with a clock, some electrodes, and a lot of patience. What he found would take neuroscience decades to fully sit with. His name was Benjamin Libet. He asked people to do almost nothing, just flex a finger whenever they felt like it. No pressure, no timing, total freedom. While they waited, Libet wasn't watching their hands. He was watching something quieter, a thin electrical line, an EEG reading, traced from the surface of the brain. And in the seconds before every single movement, that line began to rise, slowly, quietly, like something gathering itself before it moves. Scientists would later name it the readiness potential. On its own, that's not strange. Of course, the brain builds up activity before it acts. Every engine turns over before it runs. Here's the part that shocked everyone. Libet also asked each person to watch a fast-moving clock and report the exact moment they felt like moving, the moment the decision felt conscious. When he compared the timing, the readiness potential came first, before the person felt they had decided anything, by about a third of a second. A third of a second doesn't sound like much, but it was enough to ask a very uncomfortable question. If your brain moves first, what exactly is you doing? For decades, Libet's results stood as a kind of ghost story in neuroscience, repeated in classrooms, quoted in books, rarely questioned out loud. But science doesn't stay still. Later researchers went looking for cracks, and they found some. One problem: timing a feeling is hard. Asking someone to watch a clock and report an inner moment, that's not a neutral measurement. That's a guess wearing a lab coat. Another problem raised by neuroscientist Aaron Scherger. His idea was almost unsettling in how simple it was. Picture your brain's background hum, the constant, meaningless static of billions of neurons, always quietly rising and falling, all day, every day. When you're free to move whenever you like, Scherger argued, you don't wait for a decision to form. You wait for that static to randomly drift high enough to tip you over. Not a decision, building toward you. A threshold, quietly, randomly being crossed. That doesn't erase Libet's discovery. It complicates it, which, in science, is usually a compliment. Newer studies pushed even further. In 2008, researchers using brain scans found patterns in the prefrontal cortex that could predict a simple choice up to several seconds before a person felt they'd made it. Not with certainty, with a lean, a tilt in probability, like weather forecasting for a decision. None of this proves your choices are fake. It suggests something stranger, that a decision isn't a single moment, it's a process, building quietly before it ever reaches the part of you that narrates your life. Libet himself wasn't ready to let go of free will. He noticed something else in his data. Even after the readiness potential appeared, people could still stop themselves. Right at the end, a last-second cancellation. He called it the conscious veto. Some later called it, almost jokingly, free won't. Maybe you don't get to choose the impulse, but you might still get the final word on whether it becomes an action. Once you know this, you start noticing it everywhere. Unlocking your phone before you've thought about why. Reaching for something salty or sweet before any real hunger arrives. interrupting someone mid-sentence and only afterward realizing you did it, driving the familiar route home and arriving with no memory of the turns. None of these felt like decisions while they were happening. They felt like you, just being you, which might be the most unsettling part. The brain doesn't announce most of its work. It only hands you the final draft and lets you believe you wrote the whole thing. So is free will real? Neuroscience still isn't sure, and anyone who tells you it's settled is selling something. Picture that hand again, the one from the very beginning, reaching for the coffee cup. It doesn't actually matter anymore whether that reach began in the light of conscious thought or in the quiet static beneath it. Because maybe that's not the most useful question. Maybe freedom was never about making every decision from a blank, conscious start. Maybe freedom begins the moment you notice one happening. The reach for the coffee cup you don't even want yet. The urge to check your phone. The word you're about to interrupt with. You may not get to choose where that impulse comes from, but for one small, quiet moment, right before it becomes an action, you get to choose what happens next. If this made you see your own mind a little differently, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe to Chronovault, and we'll keep asking the questions your brain would rather you didn't notice.